All right, very first problem. How do we attack that? Cross multiply. Yeah, that's a cross multiply. So 3 times x is 3x equals, cross the other way, 9 times 5 is 45. And then to solve that, we just divide by 3. So x equals 15. That should have been something you would have learned a very long time ago. Yeah. That's why we started with the very basic one. All right, guys, go ahead and get out your step-by-step paper, the green. Yes, the one that Dakota has out. My only good student this morning. Oh my gosh, Dakota, my good student this morning. Did you guys hear that? All right, guys, on your green paper, the bottom row, I believe middle column, says fraction equals fraction. Look at your green paper, bottom row, middle column. See where it says solving? How do you know if it's solving? There's an equal sign. Yes, if you have an equal sign, we can actually solve these. So solving fraction equals fraction, you are cross multiplying. It's something very similar to this. So when we cross multiplied this, 3 times x was 3x. Before you cross the other way, you have to put the equal sign down. Okay? So what about that one? Is it still fraction equals fraction? Yeah, so we're going to still cross multiply. Does it matter which way I cross first? Savannah? What do you mean a sign from the bottom? I know. Is it still fraction equals fraction? Cross multiply. It does not matter which way you cross first. So now let me show you how I would like you to write this, okay? So when I'm crossing this way first, hi, Ruben. All right. So when we are cross multiplying 3 times x minus 1 equals, don't actually distribute it right away. Because what happens is students who try to do that all in one step, they always forget something. Okay? So for me personally, I always write it down first, and then I will actually distribute it. So you cross, write that down, equals, I'm going to cross the other way, which is 4 times x plus 1. And what do you notice with my fractions? What happened to them? They're gone. My fractions are gone. So that's what we want. When we're solving, I don't want fractions. We can just get rid of them. So for here, if it's fraction equals fraction, you just cross multiply. My fraction's gone. Now let's solve this. So 3 times x is 3x. And that gives me negative 3 equals 4x plus 1. Or I'm sorry, 4x plus 4. And so most people do if they don't write it down. They write 4x plus 1. All right, guys, solving from here. This is just a normal equation, right? We're going to subtract 3x on both sides. Guys. And then subtract 4. So x equals negative 7. Don't matter. Now, do you guys remember those whole restrictions I was trying to get into your head from the beginning? Do you remember we talked about restrictions? What would your restrictions have been for this problem? Plus or minus 1 would have been your restrictions, right? From the denominators? Your restrictions would have been plus or minus 1. So me getting an answer of negative 7, is that okay? Yes. Now, had I gotten a 1 or a negative 1 for an answer, it would not have been a good answer. It would have been considered extraneous. Extraneous. I love that word. All right, number 2. 2, you know, the one right after 1. All right, number 2. So it is fraction equals fraction. The reason I keep kind of drawing your attention to that, on your green sheet on the bottom right, look at that column. What's the bottom right one say? More than 2 fractions. So tomorrow, or actually Friday, I won't see you guys tomorrow. Friday, we will do the ones where there's not just fraction equals fraction. You'll have more going on. Okay, those ones are a little harder. Today's the easier one, that's why I don't feel bad teaching it to you when we have such a short time today. All right, so cross multiply. Again, does not matter which way we go. So 2 times x minus 1. And then before you cross the other way, you have to remember the equal sign. I can't tell you how many kids lose their equal sign. Yes? What does your step-by-step say? Does it say to factor? What's it say? What's step one? Cross multiply. Okay. And the reason we don't, you're right, I could. But the reason I don't is because I'm trying to solve right now, not factor first. If I factor it first, I'm just going to have to multiply it back together to try to solve it. So we don't want to do that. Cross the other way. 1 times x squared minus x. At this point, your fractions are gone. Now it's just a regular equation we're going to solve. So we will distribute. So 2x minus 2. This side, distributing a 1 doesn't really change anything. So x squared minus x. How do I solve something like that? Courtney? I can't. Because I'm going to still have a b term. Savannah? You could use quadratic formula, or what's regular factoring? I would try to factor it first. To me, that's faster. But yeah, anytime, guys, we have an x squared, we got to set that equal to 0. Now, Courtney said something about taking the square root. That's fine if your b term goes away. In this case, it's not going to go away. So if I subtract the 2x over here, and I'm going to have to add the 2, right, we get 0 equals x squared minus 3x plus 2. So anytime you have an x squared, if you need to make yourself a note, make a note. If you have an x squared, you want to set it equal to 0, and then use one of your other methods from chapter 4. All right, so I can go ahead and factor this. How does this factor? Good. X minus 1, x minus 2. So what does x equal? 1 and 2. Now, read through your green sheet. What were your steps? What was step 1? Cross multiply. Solve for x, and then check for extraneous solutions. So this means I got to go back and look what my restrictions were. What were my restrictions? This one gave me 1. Now, back to Brittany's, couldn't I factor this? In order to know the restrictions, you'd have to factor that. So if I factored that, she said take out an x. So what would my restrictions have been? 0 and 1. Look at the answers I have. It's only 2. 1's extraneous. Since that's one of my restrictions, it can't be an answer, because that's going to put a 0 in the denominator, and we all know what happens to Cookie Monster and how sad you are when you have a 0 in the bottom, right? You have no friends. Cookie Monster has no cookies, and you're sad because you have no friends. How are we doing? Yep. The restrictions part, the extraneous answer. That's why it's important to read that paper, because it's going to remind you to go back and look for that. Okay? All right, number 3. Try this one on your own. All right, guys, let's go ahead and go through step by step. We'll see how we did. So cross multiplying, again, does not matter which way you go first. And then don't forget the equals before you cross the other way. We will distribute, so we get x squared plus 4x equals 3x plus 12. Do we have to set this one equal to 0? So right now? So right now? Okay, you said eventually. I got worried. Yeah. Yeah, I'm at the point where I'm ready to solve, and I have an x squared, so it needs to be set equal to 0. So subtract the 3x over, we get just 1x, and subtract the 12. That will factor to x plus 4 and x minus 3. So x equals negative 4 and positive 3. Are we good? What's your last step? Check for those restrictions. So this one's going to give me, what's the restriction here? Marissa, put it away. That's -4. How do I tell the restriction here? Good. You'd have to factor the x out to get x plus 4. So it'd be 0 and -4. So the answers I have, -4 is a no-go. A 0 is also a restriction, but I didn't get that for an answer. All right, guys, last one for today. Okay, last one. So on this problem, Savannah. Okay. So cross multiplying here, again, does not matter which way I go first. So I have 2 times x squared minus 10x plus 16. Bye. Equal sign. Can you see how people lose the equal sign? Like, it happens a lot. People forget that equal sign in there. Cross the other way. So I have 2x minus 4 times x plus 2. How do you multiply, and where do I go from here? You were about ready to say it. Let's distribute on this side. So watch your mouth. So 2x squared minus 20x plus 32. And then we will distribute on the other side. She just cursed at me. Did you guys hear that? You're all witness, right? That was a 4-letter F word right there. Like the number 4? All right, here we go. So on this side, we get 2x squared plus 4x minus 4x minus 8. So guys, we do need to distribute. This is why I have you set it up the way I do to start with, because that shows up quite often. That way you remember you have to distribute that out. Okay, Savannah? They do cancel out. So 4x minus 4x cancels. Will I need to set this equal to 0? Very good. If I go to subtract the 2x to move it over here, 2x squared, what happens to your 2x squared? It cancels. So we got a hot mess going on. So right now we have negative 20x plus 32 equals negative 8. It's kind of where we're at right now, what we got left on. So from there, do I set it equal to 0? No. Yeah. I'm going to subtract the 32. I'm trying to get x by itself, right? So negative 20x equals negative 40. So what does x equal? Gotta get x equals 2. What's your last step? Those restrictions are checked for extraneous. Come back to the beginning. What's your restriction here? Negative 2. So that one's okay. What are the restrictions here? How do I find the restrictions? You got to factor this. If I factor this to look for the restrictions, what do I get? X minus 8 and x minus 2. So my restrictions would be 2 and 8. So what's that mean with my answer? It's not an answer. That's no good. So what do I say? Wrong? I just write wrong? What do I write? There is no answer. There's no solution. There is no solution. There is nothing you can put in there for x that's going to make those two things equal to each other. That's not going to put a 0 on the bottom. So there is nothing you can do. How are we feeling? That's just cross multiplying fraction equals fraction. That's the easier part of solving. Okay.